My name is Janet, and I'm 28 years old. 6 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I was working at a marketing firm in Seattle, living independently, finally proving I could make it on my own. Then the company downsized, and suddenly I found myself back in my childhood bedroom in Ohio, surrounded by participation trophies and faded posters that reminded me of dreams I'd long since abandoned. Living with my mom, Beverly, and my younger sister, Diane, should have been temporary, just until I got back on my feet. But every day in that house felt like being pulled back into a role I'd spent years trying to escape. What I didn't know was that one explosive argument would finally force me to reveal a secret I'd been carrying for 12 years. A secret that would change everything my sister believed about our family. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more real-life stories like this one. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. Coming home felt like stepping back in time, but not in a good way. The same floral wallpaper covered the kitchen walls, the same family photos lined the hallway, and the same dynamics I remembered from high school were waiting for me like an old trap I'd somehow walked back into. My sister Diane had just graduated from college and was preparing for medical school. At 22, she was everything my mother Beverly had always wanted in a daughter. Straight A student, pre-med track, the kind of girl who remembered to call home twice a week and never forgot Mother's Day. I'd watch her at the breakfast table, perfectly put together even at 7 in the morning, discussing her MCAT scores while I nursed my coffee and scrolled through job postings on my phone. Beverly worked as a school administrator and had built her entire identity around being the mother of a future doctor. She'd introduced Diane to everyone as my daughter who's going to medical school, while I became my other daughter who's between jobs right now. The difference in tone was impossible to miss. Growing up, I'd been the creative one. I won art contests, wrote for the school newspaper, got accepted to several colleges with partial scholarships for my portfolio. But those accomplishments never seemed to matter much in our house. When I'd bring home an A in art class, Mom would ask why I couldn't get an A in math like Diane. When I got my first paid writing gig in high school, she'd remind me that writing wasn't a stable career path like medicine. Now, living back home, those old patterns felt magnified. I contributed to groceries, helped with household expenses from my dwindling savings, and spent hours each day job hunting. Meanwhile, Diane lived rent-free, had her medical school applications paid for, and got her laundry done by Mom without even asking. I tried to be grateful. I reminded myself that I was lucky to have a place to stay while I figured things out. But watching my mother beam with pride every time Diane mentioned another medical school acceptance, while barely acknowledging my efforts to rebuild my career, made those feelings of gratitude harder to maintain each day. The small slights were constant. Mom would cook Diane's favorite meals and ask me to pick up ingredients. She'd plan shopping trips with Diane and invite me along to carry bags. When relatives called, she'd gush about Diane's achievements and mention me as an afterthought. "Oh yes, Janet's here too. She's looking for work." I started spending more time in my old bedroom, surrounded by reminders of who I used to be before I learned to make myself smaller to keep the peace. My old easel was still in the corner, covered with dust. My high school writing awards were stored in a box under the bed, hidden away like embarrassing secrets. The worst part was that Diane seemed completely oblivious to the favoritism. She'd thank Mom for doing her laundry in the same breath as asking me to pick up her dry cleaning since I'd be out anyway. She'd talk about her bright future while I sat there wondering if I'd ever find my way back to mine. Some nights, I'd lie in bed remembering what it felt like to have someone in my corner. When I was 16, there had been someone who believed in my dreams, who encouraged my creativity, who made me feel like I was worth something just as I was. But that person had left us, or so I'd been told. My father, Richard, had supposedly abandoned our family when the going got tough, leaving Mom to raise 2 daughters on her own. At least, that's the story I'd been living with for 12 years. The story I'd helped protect by keeping my mouth shut when every instinct told me something wasn't right about the way he'd left. But living back in this house, feeling invisible and unworthy day after day, those old questions started surfacing again. I just didn't realize how much longer I could keep those questions buried. 3 weeks into my stay, I finally got a call back. A local graphic design firm needed someone for a contract position, potentially leading to full-time work. It wasn't the dream job, but it was a start, and I felt genuinely excited for the first time since moving home. I spent 2 hours preparing for the interview, researching the company, updating my portfolio, and picking out an outfit that made me feel professional and confident. The interview went well, really well. The creative director seemed impressed with my work, and we connected over shared ideas about visual storytelling. When I left their office, I felt like myself again for the first time in months. I drove home with the radio turned up, already mentally planning how I'd contribute more to household expenses once I was working again. Maybe I could even take Mom and Diane out for dinner to celebrate. I walked through the front door with a smile, ready to share my good news. Instead, I found the dining room transformed. Beverly had pulled out the good china, the kind she usually reserved for holidays. Diane sat at the table surrounded by acceptance letters, her laptop open to what looked like scholarship information. Mom was on the phone with someone, probably a relative, her voice bright with excitement. "Oh, here's Janet now," Mom said when she saw me. "Janet, guess what? Diane got accepted to 3 more medical programs today, including her top choice. We're planning a celebration dinner for this weekend." I tried to match her enthusiasm. "That's wonderful, Diane. Congratulations. And actually, I have some good news too. I just had an interview that went really well, and I think there's a good chance I'll get the job." Mom nodded absently. "That's nice, dear. Now we need to figure out the menu for Saturday. Do you think you could pick up groceries tomorrow and maybe help with the cooking? Diane shouldn't have to worry about party planning when she's got so much important work to do." I felt my excitement deflate like a punctured balloon. Of course I can help. But about the interview. "Diane, tell me about the scholarship package again," Mom interrupted, turning her full attention back to my sister. "I want to make sure I have all the details when your Aunt Margaret calls tonight." That's how it went for the rest of the week. I became the invisible support staff for Diane's celebration, while my potential job opportunity was treated like a minor footnote. I planned the menu, shopped for ingredients, cleaned the house, and arranged flowers, while Diane studied for her entrance exams, and Mom called everyone we knew to share the good news about her brilliant daughter. Saturday arrived with a house full of relatives and family friends. Uncle Frank and Aunt Margaret drove in from Columbus. Mrs. Patterson from down the street brought her famous potato salad. Everyone gathered around Diane, asking about her plans, her dreams, her bright future in medicine. I spent most of the evening in the kitchen, refilling drinks and washing dishes. When I did join the conversation, I was either ignored or given polite smiles before the attention returned to Diane. At one point, I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Margaret by the back door. "Diane's my successful daughter," she was saying. "She's always been focused and driven. Janet's still figuring things out, you know. She moved back home recently. I keep telling her she needs to find something more practical, like Diane did." I stood there holding a tray of dirty dishes, feeling like I'd been slapped. Practical. As if my years of experience, my skills, my dreams were just hobbies I needed to outgrow. As if my art, my writing, my creative work was somehow less valuable than Diane's textbooks and test scores. That night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were put away, I retreated to my bedroom and pulled out an old photo album I'd found in my closet. There were pictures of our family from before Dad left. In every photo, I was smiling, confident, surrounded by art projects and awards. Dad was usually beside me, looking proud as I showed off a painting or a story I'd written. I remembered those conversations we used to have, late at night when I couldn't sleep. He'd find me in the kitchen or the living room, working on some creative project, and instead of telling me to go to bed, he'd sit down and ask about what I was making. He'd listen to my ideas, offer suggestions, encourage me to think bigger. "You've got something special, Janet," he used to say. "Don't ever let anyone convince you to make yourself smaller." But he'd left us when I was 16, right when I needed that support most. Or at least, that's what Mom had always told us. He'd gotten tired of the responsibility, found someone else, abandoned his family when things got complicated. That's the story that explained why we never heard from him, why he never visited, why his promises turned out to be lies. Sitting there in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by evidence of dreams I'd been taught to consider impractical, I found myself wondering about that story for the first time in years. Something about it had never felt quite right, but I'd been too young to question it, and later too afraid to rock the boat. As I put the photo album away, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't keep living like this, feeling grateful for scraps of attention while watching someone else live the life I'd been told I didn't deserve. I just had no idea how explosive the truth would turn out to be. Monday morning brought the rejection email I'd been dreading. The design firm had chosen someone else, someone with more local experience, they said. I stared at my laptop screen, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settle in my chest. I was still processing the news when Mom walked into the kitchen, already dressed for work and carrying her travel coffee mug. She glanced at my laptop and must have read something in my expression. "Bad news about the job?" she asked. Though her tone suggested she'd already moved on to thinking about her day. "They went with someone else." "Well, maybe that's for the best," she said, checking her watch. "You might want to start thinking about something more practical anyway. Look at Diane. She chose a stable career path, something with real potential. Maybe you could consider going back to school, getting certified in something useful." Before I could respond, Diane appeared in the doorway, already in her workout clothes and holding her water bottle. She'd been getting up early to run, part of her stress management routine for medical school prep. "What are we talking about?" she asked, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Janet didn't get the design job," Mom explained. "I was just suggesting she might want to explore more realistic options." Diane gave me what I'm sure she thought was a sympathetic look. "You know, Janet, maybe Mom's right. The creative industry is really competitive. Have you thought about something with better job security? I have friends who started in business or healthcare, and they're doing really well." I felt something snap inside me. Here were the two people who were supposed to support me, supposed to believe in me, telling me my dreams weren't worth pursuing, telling me to settle for less because what I wanted wasn't practical enough for them. "My creative work is valuable," I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. "I have skills, experience, and a portfolio that speaks for itself. Just because I didn't get one job doesn't mean I should give up on everything I've worked for." Mom set down her coffee mug with a sharp click. "There's no need to get defensive, Janet. We're trying to help you face reality here." "Reality?" The word came out louder than I'd planned. "What reality are we talking about, Mom? The reality where I pay for groceries and clean this house while being told my work doesn't matter? The reality where I'm supposed to be grateful for being treated like hired help at my own sister's celebration?" "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Mom said, her voice rising to match mine. "You've always been ungrateful for everything we've given you. Do you have any idea how hard it's been for me, raising two daughters on my own, the sacrifices I've made?" Diane was watching this exchange with wide eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "Maybe we should all just calm down." "No, Diane, she needs to hear this," Mom continued, turning her full attention back to me. "Your sister appreciates what family means. She understands loyalty and gratitude. You just take what you need and complain when it's not enough." I felt 12 years of buried resentment rising in my throat. "Gratitude? You want to talk about gratitude? I've been grateful and quiet and small for years, Mom. I've watched you give Diane everything while treating me like an inconvenience in my own home." "Your sister earned her place here," Mom shot back. "She worked hard, made good choices, and has something to show for it. Maybe if you had your father's work ethic instead of his selfish attitude, you'd understand what real success looks like." That was it. That was the moment 12 years of careful silence shattered like glass. I looked directly at Mom, then at Diane, who was still standing there with her apple, looking confused and concerned. The words came out before I could stop them. "Do you want me to tell her why Dad really left us, Mom?" The change in Beverly's face was instant and unmistakable. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened slightly, and all the color drained from her cheeks. For a moment, she looked exactly like someone whose deepest secret had just been threatened with exposure. "What are you talking about?" Diane asked, looking between us. "Dad left because he was irresponsible. Because he couldn't handle the pressure of being a father and husband." I kept my eyes on Mom, watching her scramble for control of the situation. "Is that really what you want her to believe, Mom? Because I remember what actually happened. I remember why he really left." "Janet, stop," Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you're talking about." But I was done protecting her lies, done being the guardian of secrets that had poisoned our family for over a decade. Diane deserved to know the truth, even if it destroyed everything she thought she knew about our mother. "Actually, Mom, I know exactly what I'm talking about. The question is, are you ready for Diane to know too?" I'll never forget the look on Diane's face as I began to tell her what really happened 12 years ago. It was the look of someone whose entire world was about to collapse, and they had no idea it was coming. "I was 16, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, and I came home early from school because I was sick. I thought the house was empty, but I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Mom and Dad were fighting, but it wasn't the kind of argument I'd heard before. This was different." Beverly had backed against the kitchen counter, her face pale and her hands shaking. "Janet, please don't do this." But but I was past the point of protecting her. Dad had found out about your affair, hadn't he, Mom? He'd discovered you were sleeping with Principal Morrison from the high school where you worked. Diane dropped her apple. It hit the floor with a dull thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. That's not true, Diane whispered, but she was looking at Mom's face, and Mom's face was telling a different story than her words. I continued, 12 years of suppressed truth pouring out of me. Dad was devastated, but he wanted to work it out. He was willing to go to counseling, to rebuild the marriage, to keep our family together. But you didn't want that, did you, Mom? You'd already chosen Harold Morrison over us. Beverly's lips were moving, but no sound was coming out. The ultimatum wasn't his, Diane. It was hers. Mom told Dad he could leave quietly and let her control the narrative, or she'd claim he was abusive and fight him for custody. She said she'd make sure he never saw us again, that she'd turn us against him completely. No, Diane said, shaking her head. That's not what happened. Dad abandoned us. He left us for another woman. Harold Morrison was married too, I said gently, watching my sister's face crumple as the truth sank in. Mom broke up 2 families, not just ours. She chose her affair over her marriage, and when Dad wouldn't just disappear without a fight, she made sure he had no choice. I turned back to Beverly, who was now gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. You convinced everyone that Dad was a deadbeat who ran out on his responsibilities. You told the whole family, all our friends, everyone at church that he'd abandoned his daughters for some other woman. But that was your story, wasn't it? You were the one who left your family for someone else. Diane was crying now. Silent tears streaming down her face, but he never called, he never visited, he never even sent birthday cards. He tried, I said, and this part was the hardest to admit because it meant acknowledging my own complicity in the lie. He called constantly those first few months. Mom would hang up on him or tell him we didn't want to talk to him. He sent letters that Mom threw away before we could see them. He even tried to pick us up from school a few times, but Mom had already told the administrators that he was dangerous and wasn't allowed near us. I could see Diane trying to process this, trying to reconcile the story she'd lived with for 12 years with what I was telling her now. The money, Diane, all that money you thought Mom was providing for your activities, your college applications, your medical school preparation. Dad has been sending child support this entire time. Enough for both of us. But I never saw any of it because Mom decided you were the daughter worth investing in. Beverly finally found her voice. You don't understand the situation, Janet. You were just a child. There were things you couldn't possibly comprehend. I understood enough, I shot back. I understood that you were willing to destroy Dad's relationship with his daughters to cover up your affair. I understood that you used me as your insurance policy, making me believe that if I ever told the truth, I'd be responsible for breaking up what was left of our family. The kitchen was completely silent except for Diane's quiet sobs. I looked at my sister, this woman I'd protected for so long, and felt the weight of those wasted years settling on my shoulders. I kept quiet because I thought I was protecting you. I told her, you were only 10 years old, and you were so heartbroken when Dad left. I thought it would be worse for you to know the truth, but now I realize I wasn't protecting you at all. I was protecting her. Diane looked up at Beverly, her eyes red and searching. Is it true? Did you have an affair? Did you drive Dad away? For a long moment, Beverly didn't answer. Then, in a voice so small I could barely hear it, she said, you don't understand how complicated marriage can be. Your father and I had problems long before Harold came along. It wasn't exactly a confession, but it wasn't a denial either. And for Diane, it was enough. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, what did you do to our family? The next few hours felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Diane sat at the kitchen table, staring at her hands while Beverly tried desperately to explain away 12 years of lies and manipulation. You have to understand, Mom kept saying, I was protecting you girls from a messy situation. Your father was angry. He was threatening to take you away from me. I did what I thought was best. But Diane was remembering things now, pieces of the puzzle she'd never thought to examine before. That's why you always changed the subject when I asked about Dad. That's why you'd get upset whenever I said I missed him. You were children, Beverly said weakly. You needed stability, not confusion. We needed our father, Diane replied, and the pain in her voice was devastating. I spent years thinking my dad didn't love me enough to stay. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I watched my sister process this betrayal and felt a complex mix of relief and guilt. Relief that the truth was finally out. Guilt that I'd waited so long to tell it. How different would Diane's life have been if she'd known our father hadn't chosen to abandon her? All those times you said Dad was irresponsible with money, Diane continued, her voice getting stronger. All those times you acted like you were struggling to support us alone, he was sending money, wasn't he? He was trying to take care of us." Beverly's silence was answer enough. Diane turned to me, and I could see her mind working, connecting dots she'd never noticed before. "Janet, all those jobs you worked in high school, all those times you said you couldn't afford things I wanted to do, you were working because Mom wasn't sharing Dad's support money with you, were you?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. "And the college applications? You only applied to schools with scholarships because Mom said we couldn't afford the others. But she paid for all of mine without question." "Diane," I said gently, "Dad's support checks were enough to help both of us, but Mom made choices about how that money got spent." My sister put her head in her hands. "I got your share, didn't I? All those years, I was living off money that should have been split between us, and I never even knew." The guilt on Diane's face was almost as hard to watch as Beverly's desperate attempts to maintain control of the narrative. "It's not your fault," I told her. "You were a kid, you didn't know." But Beverly wasn't finished fighting. "This is exactly why I kept the truth from you," she said, her voice sharp with panic. "Look how upset you're getting. Look how this is tearing our family apart. I was trying to give you stability, Diane. I was trying to give you the best possible life. By lying to me for 12 years, Diane stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "By keeping me from my father, by letting me believe he didn't love me." "Your father made his choices," Beverly said, but even she seemed to realize how weak that sounded now. "No," Diane said firmly. "You made the choices. You chose your affair over your marriage. You chose to drive Dad away rather than face the consequences of what you'd done. And you chose to lie to us about it for over a decade." Beverly's mask was finally slipping completely. The controlled, respectable school administrator was disappearing, replaced by someone desperate and cornered. "Fine," she said, her voice brittle. "You want the truth. Your father was weak. He couldn't handle that I'd found someone who understood me better than he did. Harold and I connected in ways your father and I never could." "Harold Morrison?" Diane asked. "Your boss, the married man you had an affair with?" "Harold left his wife for me," Beverly said, as if that somehow justified everything. "We've been together for years. He was going to propose after you graduated, Diane. We were planning a future together." The casual way she said it, like our family's destruction had been just an inconvenient obstacle to her happiness, made me sick to my stomach. "Where is he now, Mom?" I asked quietly. "Where's Harold during all of this?" Beverly's face crumpled slightly. The truth was, Harold had distanced himself as soon as the family drama became public. Beverly had been alone for months, though she'd never admitted it. Diane was staring at our mother like she was looking at a stranger. "You destroyed our family for a man who isn't even here to support you now." "Don't you judge me," Beverly snapped. "Both of you. I did the best I could in an impossible situation." "The best you could," I stood up. 12 years of anger finally finding its voice. "The best you could was stealing my relationship with my father. The best you could was using his money to favor one daughter over the other. The best you could was building Diane's entire life on a foundation of lies." Beverly's face was red now, her composure completely gone. "If you contact your father, if you drag all this ancient history up again, you're both out of this house. Do you understand me? I won't have my home turned into some kind of therapy session for problems I've spent years helping you move past." I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who'd controlled my life through fear and manipulation for so long, and felt something shift inside me. "Good," I said simply. "I should have left years ago." For the first time since I'd started telling the truth, Beverly looked genuinely scared. She'd expected me to back down, to choose the safety of home over the uncertainty of independence. She'd counted on my fear of abandonment, my need for approval, my habit of making myself small to keep the peace. But I was done being small. I was done protecting people who had never protected me. "Diane," I said, turning to my sister, "you don't have to choose right now, but I need you to know that everything I've told you is true. And Dad deserves to know that his daughters finally understand what really happened." Diane nodded slowly, tears still streaming down her face. "I want to see him," she whispered. "I want to talk to him." And with those words, everything Beverly had built to keep us under her control began to crumble completely. Finding our father's contact information wasn't as hard as I'd expected. Beverly had kept some of his letters, hidden in a box in her bedroom closet, along with legal documents from their divorce. I found his current address and phone number on papers dated just 6 months earlier. He was living in Kentucky now, about 4 hours away. The phone number had a local area code, suggesting he'd stayed relatively close to us all these years. My hand was shaking when I dialed. I had no idea what I was going to say, how I was going to explain 12 years of silence, or whether he'd even want to hear from me. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Hello, Dad, my voice came out as barely a whisper. There was a long pause. Then, Janet, is that really you? I started crying before I could say another word. Just hearing his voice, hearing the joy and disbelief in it, broke something open inside me that I'd kept locked away for years. It's me, Dad. It's really me. Oh, sweetheart. His voice was thick with emotion. I've been hoping for this call for so long. Are you okay? Is everything all right? I managed to stop crying long enough to speak. I know the truth now, Dad. About why you really left. About Mom and Harold Morrison. About everything. Another long silence. Then, how long have you known? I witnessed the fight when I was 16, but I kept quiet because I thought I was protecting Diane. I just told her everything this morning. Is she okay? Even after 12 years of forced separation, his first concern was still for his daughters. She's hurt and confused, but she's okay. Dad, she wants to see you. We both do. I could hear him crying now. I've wanted to see you girls every single day for 12 years. I never stopped trying to reach you, Janet. Even when your mother made it impossible, even when I thought you might hate me for leaving, I never stopped loving you. We know that now. Dad, there's so much I need to tell you, so much I need to apologize for. You don't need to apologize for anything, sweetheart. You were a child caught in an impossible situation. I'm the one who should apologize for not fighting harder, for not finding a way to stay in your lives. We talked for over an hour. He told me about his life now, about the small accounting firm he'd built from nothing after the divorce drained his savings. He'd remarried 5 years ago, a kind woman named Carol, who knew all about his daughters and had been hoping to meet us someday. He told me about the birthday cards he'd sent that were returned unopened, the Christmas presents he'd bought that had nowhere to go, the graduation announcements he'd never received but had found out about through mutual friends. He'd been following our lives from a distance, proud of every achievement, heartbroken by every milestone he'd missed. When I told him about living back home, about the job struggles and the favoritism and the way Beverly had used his support money, his voice got hard in a way I'd never heard before. She spent your share on Diane, he asked. It's not Diane's fault. She didn't know. Of course it's not Diane's fault. But Janet, you should have had the same opportunities, the same support. You should have known that I was trying to provide for both of my daughters equally. By the time we hung up, we'd made plans to meet that weekend. He was going to drive halfway to a town in Indiana where we could spend the day together without the pressure of dealing with Beverly's reaction. Diane had been listening to my side of the conversation from the kitchen doorway, and when I hung up, she was crying again. He sounds exactly the same, she said softly. His voice sounds exactly like I remembered. He wants to see you too. He never stopped wanting to see you. I don't know what to say to him. I believed Mom's lies for so long. I said terrible things about him to other people. He understands, Diane. He knows we were children who were told a story and had no reason to doubt it. Beverly had been conspicuously absent during the phone call, but she emerged from her bedroom as we were planning our trip to Indiana. Her face was puffy and red, and she looked older than I'd ever seen her. You're really going to do this? She asked. You're going to destroy everything I've worked to build here? What have you built, Mom? Diane asked quietly. A family based on lies? A home where one daughter gets everything and the other gets blamed for being ungrateful? I built stability, Beverly insisted. I gave you a good life, Diane. I sacrificed everything for your future. You sacrificed our relationship with our father for your affair. I corrected. You sacrificed my opportunities for Diane's. You sacrificed the truth for your own convenience. Beverly's face hardened. Fine, go meet your father, see if he's as wonderful as you remember. But don't come crying to me when you realize that the grass isn't always greener. We won't, I said simply. And for the first time in 12 years, I meant it. The drive to Indiana felt like traveling to another world. Diane sat in the passenger seat, alternating between nervous excitement and overwhelming guilt. She kept apologizing for things that weren't her fault, for believing Mom's lies, for accepting advantages she didn't know came at my expense. I should have questioned it, she said for the 10th time as we crossed the state line. I should have wondered why Dad never called, never wrote, never tried to see us. You were 10 years old when he left, I reminded her. Children trust their parents to tell them the truth. You had no reason to doubt what Mom told you, but later, when I was older, I could have tried to find him myself. Mom made sure we believed he didn't want to be found. She made sure we thought any attempt to contact contact him would end in rejection and more pain. We met Dad at a small diner in a town called Richmond, chosen because it was exactly halfway between our locations and neutral enough that we could talk without feeling overwhelmed. I saw him through the window before we even parked, sitting in a corner booth and checking his watch nervously. He looked older, of course. His hair had gone completely gray, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 12 years ago. But his smile when he saw us was exactly the same, and when he stood up to hug us, I felt like I was 16 again, coming to him with a problem I couldn't solve alone. Diane cried through most of that first hug. Years of believing her father had abandoned her, of thinking she wasn't worth staying for, of carrying that rejection like a weight in her chest. All of it poured out in those first few minutes. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry I believed her. I'm so sorry I didn't try to find you." "Shish," he said, holding her like he used to when she was small and had scraped her knee. "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart. Nothing at all." We spent 4 hours in that diner, talking about everything we'd missed. Dad told us about his business, his new wife Carol, the small house they'd bought with a guest room that had always been intended for visits from his daughters. He showed us pictures on his phone of Carol, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile who looked genuinely happy to know about us. He told us about the legal battle that had drained his savings in the first years after the divorce, how Beverly's accusations of instability and inappropriate behavior had made it nearly impossible for him to get visitation rights. He'd spent thousands of dollars on lawyers, private investigators, and court fees trying to maintain a relationship with us, but every attempt had been blocked by Beverly's legal maneuvering and our apparent unwillingness to see him. "I kept hoping that when you turned 18, you'd reach out on your own," he said, looking directly at me. "But when you didn't, I started to think maybe your mother was right. Maybe you really were better off without me." "I wanted to," I admitted. "So many times I wanted to call or write or just show up at your door. But I was scared that you'd reject me, and I was scared of what it would do to Diane if she found out I'd been lying all these years." Diane was learning things about herself too, processing memories through a new lens. She remembered now that she'd been sad a lot as a child, especially around holidays and birthdays. She'd been told it was normal grief over her father's abandonment, but now she understood it had been something deeper. Some part of her had always known the story didn't make sense. "I used to dream about you coming to get us," she told Dad. "I'd wake up disappointed that it wasn't real, and Mom would say it was better not to hope for things that weren't going to happen." Dad's jaw tightened when he heard that. "I was never not going to happen, sweetheart. I was always here, always hoping, always ready. When it was time to leave, we made plans to see each other again soon. Dad wanted us to come to Kentucky to meet Carol and see his life there. He wanted to take us to dinner, to show us around his town, to start building real relationships again." "What about Mom?" Diane asked as we walked to our cars. "What do we tell her about this?" Dad looked tired suddenly, weighed down by years of conflict he'd never wanted. "Tell her whatever feels right to you," he said. "I'm not going to spend any more energy fighting with your mother. I got my daughters back. That's all I ever wanted." But I knew Beverly wouldn't let this go quietly. She'd built her entire identity around being the wronged party, the single mother who'd sacrificed everything for her children. Having us reconnect with Dad threatened that narrative in ways she'd never be able to tolerate. The drive home was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. When we pulled into the driveway, Beverly's car was gone. The house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen. We found the note taped to the refrigerator. "Gone to think. Don't wait up." Diane crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. "She can't handle that we know the truth. She can't handle that she's not in control anymore," I corrected. And for the first time in 12 years, that felt like freedom instead of fear. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my new apartment in Lexington, Kentucky, just 20 minutes from Dad and Carol's house. I found a job at a marketing firm that actually values creativity, where my portfolio opened doors instead of being dismissed as impractical. My savings account is growing, my confidence is rebuilding, and for the first time in years, I wake up looking forward to the day ahead. Diane transferred to a medical program in Louisville, close enough that we see each other regularly, but far enough that she could start fresh without the weight of Mom's expectations crushing her every move. She's working part-time at a clinic, learning what it means to earn her own way, and discovering that she's just as capable without the cushion of unearned advantages. Our relationship with Dad isn't perfect. 12 years of separation can't be erased overnight, and we're all still learning how to be a family again. But every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every small moment of connection feels like reclaiming something stolen from us. Carol has been incredibly patient and welcoming, never trying to replace Mom, but offering the kind of steady, unconditional support I'd forgotten was possible. Beverly is still in Ohio, still working at the high school, still telling anyone who will listen that her daughters abandoned her for a father who couldn't handle responsibility. Harold Morrison never did propose. In fact, he transferred to another school district shortly after our confrontation, apparently deciding that a relationship with that much drama wasn't worth the risk to his reputation. She calls occasionally, alternating between tearful apologies and bitter accusations. Sometimes she admits that she made mistakes. Other times, she insists that everything she did was justified, that we're being unfair, that we don't understand how hard her life has been. I've learned to listen politely and hang up when the conversation becomes abusive. Diane struggles more with guilt about our mother than I do. She feels responsible for the years of favoritism, for the opportunities she received that I was denied, for not questioning the story we were told about Dad. I keep reminding her that children aren't responsible for their parents' choices, but healing from that kind of manipulation takes time. The hardest part of this whole experience has been learning to trust my own perceptions again. When you grow up being told that your memories are wrong, that your feelings are invalid, that your interpretation of events can't be trusted, it takes practice to believe in your own version of reality. Therapy has helped. Having Dad confirm the details I remembered has helped. But mostly, it's been the daily experience of living authentically, of making choices based on what I want instead of what others expect, that's taught me to trust myself again. I've learned that some family relationships are too toxic to preserve, and that protecting abusive people only enables more abuse. I've learned that gratitude should be earned through genuine care and support, not demanded in exchange for basic human dignity. Most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to reclaim your truth, even when that truth threatens everyone around you. The question I keep asking myself is how many other people are living with family secrets that poison their relationships and limit their potential? How many others are protecting people who never protected them, staying silent to keep the peace while their own dreams suffocate in that silence? If you're watching this and recognizing parts of your own story, I want you to know that speaking your truth doesn't make you ungrateful or disloyal. It makes you brave. The people who truly love you will find a way to handle your honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. The people who can't handle your truth were never really in your corner to begin with. What family secrets are you carrying? What would happen if you stopped protecting people who never protected you? What dreams might be waiting for you on the other side of that difficult conversation? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to keep lying, even when the truth breaks everything wide open. Sometimes you have to destroy a family built on lies to create space for relationships built on honesty and genuine love. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and speaking your truth? How did you find the courage to prioritize your own well-being? Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family, relationships, and finding the courage to live authentically. And share this with anyone who might need to hear that their truth matters too. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your dreams are worth fighting for, even when the people closest to you don't understand them. Especially then. I hope wherever you are in your own journey, you find the strength to choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and your own well-being over other people's convenience. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.